I do love this great saying, right? That people won't care how much you know unless they know how much you care. And so my employees know that I care about them. I care about their professional development. I care about their personal development.
Mhm.
And look, does that mean that they're going to work harder for me? I honestly don't know. But that's the way I want to live my life. I get such incredible joy out of leading this organization and any other organization that I've led because it attracts the kind of people I want to spend my time with because they're smart, they work hard, they want to learn, they want to grow. To me, those are the right components as we talk about this most valuable asset we have, that team. And as I think about attracting other people to this team and to any team I build, I want people like that on my team. And I'm only going to get them if they know how much I care.
My name is Patrick, and I'm the founder and CEO of Mindmaven, an executive coaching firm that focuses on helping people achieve true greatness by focusing on relationships. And we primarily do that by teaching people how to free up 12 hours or more a week by changing the way they work with a resource very similar to an EA. And one thing that's new about me is that I'm now author of a very awesome book called Radical Delegation. This is literally the first time I get to show it on this show. 300 pages of real pragmatics of how you can free up those 12 hours. Highly recommend it. Check it out. It's on Amazon. But this is not about me or about Mindmaven. We're here basically to have another really awesome episode of our Human First Leadership series. And today we're joined by Jeff Wald. Is that the way you would say your last name?
That is how I would say it.
Okay, good. See, the funny thing about it is that I'm German, and you probably know what that word means in German.
Hmm.
In this case, I would say the forest of wisdom.
Yep.
But Jeff here is currently working on a HR tech startup that is still in stealth, so I don't think we can talk much about it. But previously, also, you founded and started over 6 different companies. Is that about
Hmm.
right?
That is
So
correct.
you're like the prototype of a successful serial entrepreneur, and so I'm very excited to see what insights we'll be sharing with our audience today. And so let's get right into it, if you don't mind.
Of course, of course. Very excited to be here, and friend, congratulations on the book. I mean,
Oh yeah.
having written things, it's just I know that feeling when you kind of get it in your hands and you're like, this is a real
Yeah,
thing
yeah,
I've made.
yeah. It's actually really
It's
true. And
awesome.
Jeff, the thing that you don't know about me is that my story started with me being as a young kid diagnosed with dyslexia, with a heavy case of dyslexia. So
Hmm.
writing is basically torture to me. So
Right.
having this book written and getting feedback like the feedback we've gotten about it, which is exceptionally positive, was a victory beyond what most people would even think. It was really,
That is
really
great.
challenging. We spent 4 years writing it, but cool. Let's get right into it. When we spoke last, Jeff, I asked you sort of like, hey, how do you align with the ideas of a human first type of leadership approach?
Hmm.
And you ended up taking the conversation towards this concept of having a culture document. So I'd
Yeah.
love to hear more about it. Why do you think it's important? Specifically based on your experience and what led you to saying this is something I need to have.
Sure. Look, we all talk about our people are our most important asset. Okay, I'm certainly going to be in violent agreement with that statement. How are you aligning your people towards your goals? How are you making sure these most important assets are being as productive as possible and are all thinking and doing the same thing broadly? And I would say the culture document is the thing that should be driving that. This notion of who we are, why we're here, our mission statement, where we're going, our North Star, and our values. And more important than just the values, the policies and procedures that support those values. This is how we're going to show up. And so, look, the reason this is so important to me is when I think about work market, and we had a wonderful exit to our friends at ADP, but I think about the 10,000 mistakes I made building that company. This to me is number one, that I didn't do it. And it came to life for me during ADP's diligence because, look, ADP is one of the largest companies on the planet. They're going to have 1,000 people doing diligence, and they were amazing. But at one point, someone handed me a document. They had interviewed all our employees. We had several hundred. And it was 72 different answers to the question, what does work market do? My own
What?
team did not understand. I thought they did. I certainly had an answer to that question, but I was not clear. I was not intentional. I had not written it down. And so it was, that was it was a kick in the gut. And when you get those kicks in the gut, you kind of go, all right, I made a mistake. How do I fix it? And at the time, we had 4 different offices, so I went to each of the offices and I said, look, this is who I think we are. This is what I think our mission is. This is what I think our North Star is. Here's what I believe our values are. And here are the policies and procedures I've put in place to support those. But what do you all think?
Hmm.
Because it doesn't matter what I think. It matters what the hundreds of you think, and we collectively have to agree.
Hmm.
And so that became WorkMarket's first culture document post-acquisition by ADP. But Patrick, as I've started this new company,
Hmm.
the first thing I did was create a culture document. And those are living, breathing documents, man. They got to constantly change and evolve because as you add more people, the culture does
Hmm.
change. Doesn't
Hmm.
change tremendously, but it moves on the margin. So we revisit that culture document every quarter. Who we
Hmm.
are, why we're here, where we're going, and what we stand for.
Tell me more about it. Like, what is the culture document? How does it look like? What advice do you have for somebody starting off to saying, "Hey, I want to follow Jeff's footsteps here and say, I'm going to start with the culture document because that's one
Sure.
thing that I don't want to have run away from me."
Look, to me, it's a 10, 12 PowerPoint slide. I mean, for us, it's a Google Doc because we don't use
Hmm.
PowerPoint, but it is going to be when we come out of stealth. It'll be up on our website. You will click
Hmm.
on it. You can see the whole thing. Anyone of your listeners that wants an example, I'm happy to send it to them.
Hmm.
Um, it is not a complicated thing, but it is something that needs to be shared. I will tell you this: we start every team meeting here with that first page of the culture document: who we are, why we're here, and where we're going. Because I'll
Hmm.
tell you this: when your team says, oh, "Gosh, Jeff, I'm sick of hearing this," as soon as you hear that, you're halfway there.
That's
You're
right, exactly.
halfway to getting people to really, really internalize it. And
Mm.
look, right now I've got 16 people on this team.
Mm.
It would probably be okay if we didn't have a culture doc. But
Hmm.
when you get to that point where your organization has grown and you walk down the hallway and you go, "Who's that guy?" Like, "Oh,
Hmm.
that's a new engineer. We hired him 3 weeks ago."
Hmm.
If you don't have a culture doc by then, you're in trouble,
Mm.
right? Because you have people going left when you think everyone's going right. And you
That's
means
right.
you just don't have your whole team rowing in the same direction towards that North Star. Not going to say you're not going to be successful, but isn't your probability of being successful higher if everybody knows why we're here, where we're going, and everybody's rowing in the same direction? Of course they are. Of course it is.
That's right. So you basically now sort of this you implement it with your new startup, but you also did it after you sold the your last startup to
Yep.
ADP. Do you have examples of how post implementation of such a document it actually impacted people's behavior, or
Yes.
like where you just saw it? Like share some of those.
Sure. Look, I remember going to sales meetings
Mm-hmm.
and if I show up to the sales meeting, the founder's here, I'm going to do all the talking. And one of the times that I should have been illuminated to this, but I was not, was, for whatever reason, I was like, no, you kind of take it and run with it. I'll just be here to
Mm-hmm.
answer questions. And I was listening to how they were pitching the company, and I'm like, we don't do that. We don't do that. And I had a conversation with that particular individual after, and I was like, look, you said we were a marketplace, but we're building enterprise software. Like the marketplace is just a feature, and it's not really that good a feature. So it's not a great idea to put it front and center. He said, but
Mm-hmm.
you called the company Work Market when you founded it. I was like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, add that to the list of mistakes I made. And so
Mm-hmm.
we course corrected that one individual. I didn't think I had a systemic issue. I did. Fast
Mm-hmm.
forward post culture document, and I would go to sales meetings, and I was now much more. Hey, you lead, and they were all singing from the same hymn book, right?
Nice.
Here's who
Yeah.
we are, and they would say that same sentence. I can promise you this: right here, right now, at this new company, if you go ask any of our 16 employees, what does the company do? They will say the exact same sentence. If you will say, what do you hope to achieve in 3 years? They will say the exact same set of KPIs.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's just look, again, does it mean we're going to be successful? Of course not. If we didn't
Yeah.
do it, could we be successful? Of course we could. It just increases the probability of being successful if everybody is rowing in the same direction.
Let's talk about that. Why do you think that's true? And secondly, like how is that more like offering a document like this and actually giving the service, and I really call it a service of offering alignment for everybody working in your company. How is that a more humane way of leading?
Well, I think it's important that you are very clear and intentional about the kind of company you want to build. So, as a
Mm-hmm.
leader, we get the followers we deserve. And if
Mm-hmm.
you're not really clear with everybody, then that's going to be the team you're going to get. People aren't going to be clear with each other. If you are being intentional, not only will you get the team you deserve and everybody understands, but people opt in and opt out, right? Like post acquisition, when that document was then up on our website, if you applied to join Work Market, it said, please read our culture document before you come, because
Mm-hmm.
there was a page in that culture document that says, this is what we expect of a Work Market employee. This is what we expect of a Work Market manager.
Mm-hmm.
And so if that's not you, that's fine. No big deal.
Mm-hmm.
Don't come. Go
Yes.
and do something else. And if you're internal and we start to understand that isn't you either, then it is time to go.
Mm-hmm.
And is it the fair thing to do? Is it the humane thing to do? Right? Like
Mm-hmm.
you're not going to thrive here because we're a transparent team. We're very open. We like constructive criticism and collaboration. That's not for everybody.
That's right.
And if it's not for everybody, everybody's better off. You, your team, that person is better off in
Mm-hmm.
a different organization, in a different culture. And if you're not clear about it, you're just less likely to uncover it. You're less likely to course correct, and you're less likely to be successful.
I mean, if we take this concept of just the impact on the team, right? Like just listening to you, I had a bunch of like wow moments, if you will. Like it starts with people being able to self-select themselves into your organization when they're going through a hiring process,
Hmm.
right? Like it is either what they want to do or not. But if they do choose to come and work with you, they do it because they have a connection to what you're offering. And that
Absolutely.
is a much stronger basis of basically joining in. And I would say for your organization, those people that self-select into it become better employees, become, more productive members of the team. Then I was listening to you and I was like, well, now if you basically have this tool and you probably deploy other tools or you utilize the culture document, like I think it was very important to point out that you not only have the document and it collects dust somewhere, you make it become alive weekly, if not daily, right? To the point where people are throwing up. To me, it's the tip that I always give to my clients. If your employees are not throwing up hearing something, you are not doing your job as a leader, right? And that's sort of like similar to what you said. But the neat thing that you get from that is alignment. And
Hmm.
alignment is a gift to the team because it means they will feel like they can work with less friction, with less conflict, with less having to put extra effort of convincing in it, because the arguments that usually would arise don't arise because what you are doing is aligned with what everybody has to be doing, and it's easier to agree with each other, right? And when you do that, you are giving a huge gift of success to people because you are actually becoming more productive.
I would say it's not only easier to agree, it's easier to disagree, right?
Yes, there you
Like,
go.
hey, wait, guys, does this align to our North Star? Because this doesn't seem to be
Hmm.
helping us get there. So maybe this isn't the best idea. And everyone goes, oh, you're right. Actually, this would take us a little. No, we're supposed to go this way, but this would take it this way. Good, good,
Yeah,
good push, good counter.
right.
Easier to do that if we're all aligned on that North Star. Then we can agree to go there, but we can also disagree with actions that aren't helping us get there.
Yes. I would take it even a notch deeper. It is to the point, I would argue, that because often friction is particularly hard to resolve when people perceive that somebody is just issuing an opinion,
Hmm.
right? An opinion that's not based on anything, but basically, you get more friction, you get more pushback. But if you have basically a document upon which you are basing your argument, like you just said, is like, look, I don't think that actually aligns that much, based on what we said we came here to do, and here's why I think so. You start having a debate around it, which might lead to an agreement or not to an agreement, but it is a experience that is much easier to have than when you're saying, well, that's just your opinion. I have a different opinion, right? And so it becomes almost like a constitution upon which we can regulate what and how we make decisions.
It's interesting. I think we're all pretty clear that OKRs and setting goals has a greater probability of being successful, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like we set quarter by quarter with our team
Right.
members and it helps them to be successful. Great. This is that same document for like the life of the company.
Yeah.
And
See?
so it's the North Star. This is where we're going. This is that big, shiny thing years away that we're moving towards. So it is that alignment, and it does allow for those constructive conversations to say, hey, are we moving to the same thing?
Mm-hmm.
It's just
All
a
right.
big goal.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's really really interesting, and everybody is capable and willing to do OKR. Very few people will say we shouldn't do it, and so all you have to say is like start off your company with this culture document and then keep it alive. And that's
Yeah.
where I want to push our conversation towards. How do you make that? What are all of the tactics you have to basically make come alive what you guys codified into this document? For example, you said that you mentioned that you start every meeting that way. But for example, you probably have also one-on-one conversations. How do you show through your behavior that you're living the culture?
Well, it obviously depends on what your culture is. For
Mm-hmm.
us, transparency is very important. For us, learning and development is very important.
Mm-hmm.
So every single team's got, their quarterly goals. And then
Mm-hmm.
every manager has how their individual performers are going to ladder up to those quarterly goals because when their team
Mm-hmm.
hits their goals, then the company can hit their goals. But as a part of that conversation is what kind of learning and professional development are you going to do? That is
Yes.
a very important part of our culture, and therefore in
Mm-hmm.
every conversation that a manager is having with their employees, with their team members, they are going to not only outline what the KPIs are that they need to achieve, but it is also going to be up to the employee to put in 2 or 3 professional development goals that they
Mm-hmm.
want to achieve by the end of the quarter. And it's important here, Patrick, that we operate on SMART goals, right? Specific, measurable, action-oriented, relevant, and
Sure.
time-based. So if one of your employees says, "Well, I want to be a better public speaker," this is an
Mm-hmm.
actual example I had.
Yeah.
My
Yeah.
VP of Finance at Work Market said, "I want to be a better public speaker," and I said,
Mm-hmm.
"Liz, I don't know what to do with that. That can't be your goal. What are some SMART goals that ladder you to that?" I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
join Toastmasters this quarter, and I'm going to give 2 talks to groups greater than 10 people, to rooms with more than 10 people in them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, both of those things will help make you a better speaker. What was I supposed to do right at June 30th? Be like, Liz, check, you are a better public speaker than you were 3 months ago. I can't
Mm-hmm.
do that. That's
Mm-hmm.
a judgment. But I could say, Liz, have you joined Postmasters? Because you have until
Mm-hmm.
June 30th to join Postmasters. Great. Have you given 2 talks to groups greater than 10? You gave one. Great. You've got another 6 weeks to get another one done. Get it
Go
done.
ahead.
How can I support you in getting that done?
Mm-hmm.
That's my job as the manager, is to support her in her professional development goals, but I need to understand what they are, and they should be codified within their OKRs the same
Mm-hmm.
way any other kind of work goal is codified there, because that's a part of our culture. So that is something that is in that culture document. Every person will have 2 to 3 professional goals per quarter. They will be
Mm-hmm.
SMART goals. It says it in there, and then it comes to life in here. But if it's not happening, that's a big problem.
That's true. Tell me why you think that's important. So we're away from the culture document. And we're taking
Mhm.
one piece of what you believe is important to run a successful company, and that piece is that it seems like almost equal weight is given to not just the company KPIs, but basically individual KPIs of learning or development. Why do you think that's so critical?
Well, there are a few reasons. One is, to be very specific, one of our
Mm-hmm.
values is a growth mindset. We think
Mm-hmm.
that is super important, that people not
Yeah.
only, and we won't spend time on growth mindset, but if you have a value and then you don't articulate what are the policies or behaviors that support that value, then you
Hmm.
don't have that value. That value
Right.
means nothing. It's a word on a wall or on a piece of paper. So for us, putting those professional development goals into those KPIs or OKRs
Hmm.
quarter by quarter is a
Hmm.
very important policy. It is a thou shalt. Put
Hmm.
2 to 3 professional development goals in your document to be discussed with your manager once a week.
Hmm.
And so we do that because it supports our value. If people start not doing it, well, then do we value that? The answer is really no. And then
Right.
that's a problem, which maybe is not, look, it's not an existential problem. Then take it out or put something else there, right? Because that is clearly not something you value.
Correct.
And if
Yes.
I find that a manager isn't doing that, I will sit down with the manager and walk me through. Why are you not doing this? This is a value of ours. This is a
Hmm.
behavior that supports that value. And sometimes the manager go, well, I just, it's just not that important to me. I just want to hit my numbers. Okay, this isn't the right place for you.
Yes.
That's how that conversation has to go.
Hmm.
Or change the culture document because that is not something you value. And
Yeah.
the thread that runs through that is authenticity, right? If
Hmm.
you say something but do something else, you will get the team you deserve.
You know, there's something underlying in there, hidden in what you said, that I want to just, like reword,
Hmm.
just to see if I got it right. It's really interesting. The thing that you came to this like session that we're having here together is that you said, "Hey, look, the culture document is important. Do one. It's like super critical." But then I think, and this is even more powerful, you're saying the document on itself is actually not that new of an idea. A lot of people do that, but most people fail of actually making it come alive, right? And if you don't make it come alive in the way you behave on a day-to-day basis by incorporating the consequences of having these values into how you behave on a day-to-day basis, that culture document will feel like it's not worth the paper you've written it on.
Completely.
And that's how many, many startups actually struggle by having that document, but it feels like it's just a piece of paper. And it doesn't feel like I experience this literally every day, not just every week, let alone every quarter, where one reviews it. No, it has to be that you then look at the culture document and says what behaviors align to it. And you just gave us a beautiful example that in itself is actually a great learning lesson, like invest into people's growth.
Yeah.
But the learning lesson for our audience here, Jeff, is like write the document, be confident that that's what it is and that it represents values that you actually believe in and not just values you think you should have. And then basically the hard work starts of saying how do you integrate it into behaviors that basically will be enforced or will become habits or
Hmm.
become things that just happen on a regular basis so that everybody on the team, including you, is reminded of it, of the culture document, of the culture every day by just working there. And then actually the written document becomes a lot less important because it's basically just something you have to go to when you have a conflict. But other
Well,
than that,
then
the culture becomes alive.
the written document becomes your culture. And people always
Yes.
go, "Oh, I don't know, I can't define our culture." No, I don't agree with that. Your culture
Yeah,
can be defined. It is
that's
very
right.
clear what it is. You may not be able to define it, but it can be defined. And
Yes.
so if you actually, and that's why this, look, a lot of people will say, "Oh, we have a mission statement and we have our values." That doesn't mean anything. What
Hmm.
are the behaviors and what are the policies that support those things? Because if they don't exist, and I actually had a very good friend who was at his office, he had, asked me to help him out with some things, and I
Hmm.
said, "All right, what's your culture document?" And he said, "Well, we have our values." And I said, "All right, we'll list them out." And he did. And I said, "Tell me how these values come to life for you." He said, "What do you mean?"
Yes.
And I said, you have, and I'll pick on transparency again because he had it. I said, "What do you do to support transparency?" I said, "Do you take the board document, and do you present it to the entire company? Do you have an open office
Hmm.
system? Do you, have open calendars and everyone can know what everyone's doing?" He goes, "No, we don't do any of that." I said, "Well, give me something you do to support transparency." He said, "Well, I can't think of anything." I said, "Then take it out."
Yes, because you don't believe in it or you're not living up to it.
Yeah,
That's right.
you're not transparent. Like if you can't point to a behavior, if you can't point to a policy, it's not a thing.
Yes. And see, that's what makes a pretty standard idea of a culture document so powerful. If you take that step two and like say, well, how are we going to make it come alive?
Yeah.
All right, Jeff, I know we're out of time, but I want to dip into one more thing because I loved it so much. It's not related to your culture document, but it is to this thing that you said. I want that basically part of your behaviors that are based on your culture document is that
Hmm.
you spend a significant amount of time in your management and leadership one-on-ones helping people achieve their own growth,
Yes.
right? Through, you call it professional development.
Hmm.
And I want to just like discuss with you why that actually is a good idea. And my reaction to it is this. It's basically an extremely powerful idea because if somebody is feeling he's working in a place where the company cares about them and is actually giving them an environment in which they have that experience of growth, and if you want people working for you that enjoy the experience of growth, you will actually create an environment for them that actually feels really right for them, really healthy. And you probably can rely on two things. Number one, that they will work harder
Hmm.
and that they will stick around longer. Both of things that actually are really critical for a startup to succeed.
Well, here's the counter. Here's the counter, though,
Okay.
Patrick. Maybe that's not the team you want. Okay. I mean, I can't imagine that organization. I don't want to work for that organization,
Yeah, no, no, no. I'm just,
but
for people that
maybe,
believe in human first, which you do,
yeah.
right? That is, I'm not saying it's right for everyone, but basically for people that are wired like you and I are, it's
Look,
like one of the most powerful things you can do.
I started my career at an investment bank, and that was not their approach. It was do the work or get out. Like, do the
Yes.
work until you physically drop, and then someone will
Yes.
step over your passed out body to continue the work for you, and you'll jump back to the line when you can. Okay, that
Hmm.
works great for some of them. I would never go back there. But I do love this great saying, right? That people won't care how much you know unless they know how much you care. And so my employees know that I care about them. I care about their professional development. I care about their personal development.
Hmm.
And look, does that mean that they're going to work harder for me? I honestly don't know. But that's the way I want to live my life. I get such incredible joy out of leading this organization and any other organization that I have led because it attracts the kind of people I want to spend my time with because they're smart, they work hard, they want to learn, they want to grow. To me, those are the right components as we talk about this most valuable asset we have, that team. And as I think about attracting other people to this team and to any team I build, I want people like that on my team. And I'm only going to get them if they know how much I care.
Well, I have to tell you, Jeff, this is exactly where we have to stop because that was such a powerful statement that I don't want to add to it at all. I think this is really awesome. So, Jeff, thanks for taking the time. I think our audience will love what you shared. I mean, I think most of the people that listen to us, listen to the Human First Leadership series, are people that actually would align with you to almost 100%. And so, thanks for coming on board.
Such a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Awesome.